Oh god, the end of the year is coming up. Quick, upload something. Upload anything. A lot of people asked questions, and if I don't answer it here, it's not because I hate you, it's just because I can only select a couple. Although, I might hate you, I'll never tell. Also, the patrons got priority here for obvious reasons. Most of the ones, if you're a Patreon patron, I answered directly in the comments of the Q&A post, so if you don't see your question here, check there. What are, in your opinion, the biggest issues fighting games still haven't solved in the modern day? This might seem like I'm taking the side of the scrub here, but as games have started to focus on ranked, a big issue for me is that they do not handle rage quitting correctly. Now, I'm not saying you should do it, but I really think the game should be able to account for it. And I'm probably oversimplifying this considering it's a peer-to-peer system, so there's not like a server to stay alive if one player drops out. But I don't think that it's fair if someone quits a game, the game is forfeit for everyone. I think getting rage quit on is really funny to me personally, but if you're a player like fighting to specifically rank up, say you're like a streamer for example, I can just see this driving people insane, and it does every single time a new Tekken comes out. This kind of goes alongside a lot of issues with ranked specifically. It's often the most populated mode and is very clearly trying to put you against players of your own skill level. So I would really like the ability to disable your rank at all points in the game so you can just experience the game as is without the concern of the rank. On top of that, I would also like to see games stop using the League of Legends style rank system. I'm sure that it's like people like it, but I much prefer the latter experience of Age of Empires, which is a much more true ELO thing. But I can also acknowledge that depending on how this is implemented, it might discourage players from experimenting with characters that they aren't familiar with, since the game has, like, every single match has something riding on it. Other than that, incorporating vertical space into a match, I think this might be a 16:9 problem, but I want to, like, schmoove in the air. I want to do as many interesting things in the air as I can do on the ground. Maybe this is just like placebo, but it feels like a lot of games have kind of stopped doing vertical interactions, which I just don't think is, you know, I like vertical space. Opinions on arcades and IRL gaming communities in the current day. I can't really comment on arcades since I haven't really been to one since like pre-COVID, but I can absolutely comment on IRL gaming communities. When the community is an actual community in person, it's incredible. Melee has been like this for a really long time, so it's great to go to an event and still have the experience continue just beyond the event hall. You go into parties, you're meeting new people. The game in that space is really just a vehicle to social parts of life, to the point where I know many, many people in Melee who I have literally never played against or with. It's why events like Fate or When Air was around are so memorable to me, and like other events in Europe that are like Festa, which is like a week-long island getaway that has a Melee tournament but isn't really a Melee event. Those appeal heavily. It's something that I haven't really seen in the fighting game space, something that's billed as like a weekend-long party with the game that you like, rather than a tournament about being the fucking best. Yeah, it's a wrestling event again, yes! I want an event where the event itself is designed around the social aspect just as much as the game itself. And I don't mean like, oh, I want a panel where you can go and fucking watch an influencer do a Q&A. Okay, I've realized that that's a bit ironic. But like, I don't mean like panels and shit like that. I mean like pub quizzes and like actual social elements to a tournament. Maybe that's what Combo Breaker is. I've never been, and I am never going to the States for a tournament because to go to one American tournament is the price of 3 to 4 European events. That's also why I'm a huge fan of like multi-day events and prioritize those for the most part. It keeps people together before they have to like go and do their lifelong obligations. To kind of like steer this in the other direction though, this might be anecdotal, and I'm pretty sure it is, but I do worry whether people are actually in a community or just showing up to an event. I've always come back to this like same example, but I went to a Tekken 7 event pre-COVID and it was just insane to me, the amount of people that immediately left the moment that they got knocked out of the tournament. It felt like so few of the people there were there as like an actual community. And I also felt this way when I went to the TWT in Amsterdam. It felt like a lot of people were there to just go to an event, which is fine, but like, I don't want to feel like I'm a spectator. I want to feel just as valued as the people that end up on the stage. And a part of that is how the event is set up to encourage the social aspect and the culture of the communities. With Tekken specifically, where like there is such a huge feel of like celebrity culture in how it views its top players and the commentators, it really sours me, since it's kind of just, it's just wearing the veil of a community. This can be extrapolated out even further into how events advertise themselves, like with the idea of be here to be the best, or like the fucking prize pool flaunting that goes on. I hate that shit. I feel like a bit of a boomer here, but I really do worry about how this goes on to influence the incentive of the people that show up and what that develops within a community. Are we all here to go do a thing that we like? Or are we all here to go and twiddle away at the like delusion of grandeur and wait for the next game to come along so that like our tournament placement might be slightly higher? In-person communities are only ever as good as the people that go to them and the reason that they're incentivized to be there. And in the case of older fighting games, and I'd imagine rhythm games, that's for the love of the game. The old heads that were on the 3S cabs, they were there because the fucking game is tight, and they're still there because the game is tight. You can come and you can go from the events in the community, but you are always welcomed back with open arms and smiling faces because the value is that you are there. But from what I've experienced from games that generally have a circuit, you show up to show up, and everyone's just kind of playing to see what's next in the pipeline, and that's fucking stupid. Something I got asked a ton about was BlazBlue. I will get around to it. I haven't played it enough to really remember anything about it. Maybe next year we'll spend like a week with it and do like an Axel Gaming type video. Sound good? This is an odd way of asking this question since we have the NHS here, but they're basically asking how much money does a video make, and also a little thing on creators being secretive about the financial side of YouTube that I'd like to shed a little bit of light on. There is no way to talk about money on YouTube without seeming so insanely up your own arse, which is the biggest reason why nobody does it. But even after that, you got more problems. On the one hand, creators might be secretive about the amount of money that they get paid in order to have people interact with them just because their paycheck is like big. But on the flip side, if you're not getting paid a lot, it can seem like you're kind of like moping about the fact that playing video games doesn't pay very well. Not to mention, if you have a Patreon or some form of direct income, it can come across as ungrateful, or more accurately, it just kind of feels like e-begging if your income is on the lower end. That's me attempting to buffer in a like, don't go to the Patreon or increase your pledge just because of what I'm about to say. Generally speaking, 100,000 views translates roughly to 170 to 250 quid. Changes depending on the time of year a lot. This isn't a huge amount of money if your videos fluctuate a lot and are infrequent, which is why most people end up taking sponsorships, where you can end up being paid double or triple the amount that the typical ad revenue would bring in. For me, that means on average per month, this year I made about £450. In order to make this financially viable, I would have to upload both more frequently and also take sponsorships, treating this as a business first and foremost. So for me, this means that next year this is going from a job, which I've been doing 2 years to kind of like see if it was gonna work, to a hobby. We live in a hellscape of profit incentive, like absolutely fucking everything is an avenue to advertise towards you. So quite frankly, I'm just not going to contribute to it so directly as to kind of treat YouTube as a digital landfill that pays me. There is a chance that I do sponsorships on the second channel if it starts doing well, since I care less about the creative vision that's on here, and this is more like a place to train the practical video editing muscle without having to meet a certain standard. The main channel, I just really don't want to fuck with though. I did consider taking a sponsorship about like 3 months back, but then I realized it's just like, my heart's just not in YouTube videos for that reason. I would rather go back to a job than turn this into an occupation that doesn't have my heart in it. You know? You get offered 5 mil to quit videos. Do you take it? In this economy? Obviously. I make YouTube videos because they're the only creative output that pays. But I've got a little creative goblin in my mind that would do mediocrity you've never seen if it just didn't have to worry about like a paycheck. Are hot dogs sandwiches? They don't show up in the Greg's hot or cold section? No. What is it like seeing big players on YouTube mention you? At first, it was very validating, especially Super Eyepatch Wolf, who I've watched for a long time. But now it feels absolutely terrifying. When I show up in a noodle video, I cannot be brought joy, as I am waiting for the day that I disappoint everyone, and I am concerned I am already at that day. Have you ever seen or read One Piece? Come on now. If I would quit YouTube for some cash and the time to learn a new skill, there is no shot I'm trying One Piece. I don't care if there's a cut down version either. I do not give a shit. If you could import a character from XX into Xrd, who would that be? Bud? Kookaburra. Favorite FGC clip? It's gotta be Crying Brian. He is not, and he'll tell you he's not. Can you expand on your critique of SF6? No! This expands outwards to like a larger issue of making videos about video games with the intent of it being creative in some way. It is ball-bustingly draining to play something that you don't like enough to talk about why you don't like it. I was thinking about doing a long-form video about what I consider the failings of Elden Ring, since I genuinely hate that game. I can acknowledge there are good parts, I understand people enjoy it. I think that game is fucking trash. However, if I was to make that video, which I still might, at this point I wouldn't make a video about Elden Ring. I would make a video about Kingsfield 4 and Demon Souls and Dark Souls. I don't think that this is the most productive way to discuss games. This is like, there's value to breaking down something that you don't like and understanding why, but to try and turn that into a creative output is not enjoyable. And if it isn't enjoyable as the creator, you're often going to make like a lackluster experience for the viewer or the player or like whatever word you want to use for consumer. From a pure emotional perspective, it is substantially more healthy to platform something that I love rather than tear down something that I don't. Especially since when you tear down something, you will inevitably upset someone who is like just trying to have a good time. That's not to say that I don't like there isn't value to critique. I'm not saying that you shouldn't say a game is shit just because it might hurt someone else's feelings, but I'm not going to be the one to say it most of the time. What's your stance on difficult should equate to strong in game balance? I don't fully agree, purely because difficulty can be perceived as so many different things. You might find managing negative edge inputs difficult. I'm also still struggling to put the correct shape in the correct hole. And so if we were to wait for technical difficulty, your character should be stronger. But that's also implying that technical difficulty is something that should be a rewarding factor and dominant in the perceived strength of a character. For me personally, I do think it would be absurd to put the most technically difficult character as the weakest, i.e. Zato shouldn't be bottom tier, but I don't think that just because they're hard, they're deserving of particularly above average strength. Go to Greg's order. 2 sausage rolls and a steak bake. If it can be vegan, all the better, but I'm not going to have a mare either. Slap on a latte, it's all gravy. A bosh. What gave you the idea of... Oh, this guy already got this dude for me. Oh, but also because I'm a pretentious worm. What's the deal with... Oh, unlimited bacon but no games, or unlimited games but no games?
Then they ain't got no game to the game.
Top 3 Halo 3 weapons. Battle Rifle, Brute Shot, Gravity Hammer. The last 2 specifically are because of the physics shit. Honestly, the biggest flaw of the modern FPS is that in pursuing a competitive angle is they've just stopped making weapons that just make weird, unexpected shit happen. These 2 commented one after another and have the same character in their profile picture, and it kind of looks like they're locking in. About 1,100, and I haven't played either yet, and they're all good in my book. Strongest animal that I could beat in a fight? You. Who you forget real? Nobody stand Fanny, come on. Boss, I am poor. You really think that I can afford TF2 items? About 10 of those. Earl Grey or Darjeeling? It's gotta be Earl Grey, but quite frankly, I just put the fucking cup in the bag. I don't think about it too much. Most edible Guilty Gear guy. The issue is that all of them come with some kind of drawback. I would have to say jam, but in her case, that's because, like, it's a little bit of hair in the food, or gristle in the sausage roll, compared to, like, swallowing a razor blade. Blender tutorial. Probably not. There's many beginner's guides, made by people who know a lot more than me. If anything, I would be likely to do a guide on some specific assets that I'm going to be making soon, if I get them done in a way that's clean. But until then, absolutely not. Get out of my house. Have you considered YouTubeifying your thumbnails? I have a problem in my head that the thumbnail and the title are a part of the experience. And in my experience, YouTubeifying thumbnails just doesn't really, like, it doesn't do anything. I want to make videos that scratch, like, at my particular brainworms, and that to me means making thumbnails and titles that are very vague and nondescript. That's what I like. Least favorite way to eat eggs. How dare you imply that there is a bad way to eat eggs? You can also get the fuck out of my house. Favorite game that I haven't brought up in a video. If I'm being honest, I think I've brought up most of the stuff that I really like, and I'm likely to have forgotten about stuff that I've already brought up. But to give you a very nondescript list, Lisa, The Beginner's Guide, Before Your Eyes, which I know that I've mentioned before, but I really need you to give a shot. Outer Wilds, Rayman Origins, Bloodstained Curse of the Moon. I remember really liking Klonoa 2 when I was younger. I haven't replayed it, so I don't really know about today. Marble It Up, and Crisis 2 Multiplayer, which we are absolutely fucking cursed to never re-experience. Same with Shadowrun. Shadowrun was fucking awesome, and it's a pain in the ass to play now. What motivates you to play multiple fighting games that you aren't very good at? I don't think I'm the best to answer this, since I don't really engage with that many fighting games, like in reality. I've got my 3 that I kick around the can and pick your poison of games that I've gone like, nah, that's not for me. But I'll at least try to give it my best shot. I think there's a distinction between play and compete, even without the idea of a tournament. And most of the games that I've dabbled with, I've only played. I've looked at the characters and systems and thought, that guy's cool, and been like attracted to some of the ideas without going like too in depth with them. There are some games that I'd say I compete in, and those are typically the games where that like exploration phase has ended, or in more healthy cases, like kind of ebbs and flows in and out of my experience, and I've decided to stick with it, less to see what the game's systems can do, but how those systems reflect on my own thinking. These aren't really things to actively think about, they're just kind of states of mind, but recognizing when you're in one mode or the other can help you to kind of pick up more on when you might be in the mood to try something new. When it comes to engaging with multiple fighting games, it's important to firmly be in the element of play, which can be hard if you don't have the fundamentals going into it, like if you're going back to older games, or if you're taking the cultural idea of fighting games a little bit too hard and fast. I remember on the Nobody Plays Ranked video, which kind of touches on this distinction without outright saying it, someone described the ideas as like a weak mentality, which is a perspective that I think builds from the more divisive or like hardline compete mindset. I want to see what is in the toy box. That's what draws me to like a new fighting game. I don't stick with as many fighting games as people might think, but I've got a huge draw towards novelty. And considering fighting games are so old at this point, you'd imagine that designers are just running out of ways to make new ideas in them, but they just aren't. This doesn't mean I'm gonna like any of them, or like even most of them, but I want to see something and know if I'm missing out on something cool. I think that'll do. Thanks for sending in your questions, gamers. I've got some videos cooking in the oven, but I've learned that instead of talking about the things that you want to make, you should just make them instead. So instead of saying, oh, look out for this soon, whoa, I'm just gonna go and make them. All right, now go do whatever you do.